I know you're likely anxious to get into Revit and start working, but before we do, let's talk about a few high-level concepts first. For starters, when folks talk about Revit, you'll also often hear them talk about BIM. But just what exactly is BIM? BIM stands for Building Information Model or Modeling. This term has been part of the AEC industry for many years now, and it's used to describe the process of creating virtual computer models that represent actual building facilities. Revit is often described as being purpose-built for building information modeling, and this is certainly true. But this often leads to confusion that somehow Revit and BIM are the same thing. Revit and BIM are not the same thing. Revit is a tool used to help us achieve BIM, and BIM is a process that we follow to create building model data that is essentially two things: coordinated and computable. There is certainly more to it than that, but in my opinion, these are the two most important tenets of BIM. If all the parts and pieces that make up your BIM project are fully coordinated with one another and don't require any manual updates in order to keep them in sync, and if you have a robust and rich data source of information that can be used both internally by the system and exported out to the project team to do meaningful computations, then you have BIM. Some examples of the benefits of BIM include performing design computations or energy analysis, or calculating structural loads. You might want to do lighting design or heating and cooling computations. Any of these things become possible when you have a rich and robust BIM. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can achieve BIM, and Revit is an excellent tool to help us achieve it because it does many of the things that I've just described natively. But there is one common misconception that I want to address. Often when you hear the word BIM, in the same sentence, you'll hear people talk about 3D. And you could be left with the impression that in order to be BIM, you must be 3D. And conversely, if you have 3D, then you automatically have BIM. Well, sadly, neither of these is true. Now, don't get me wrong. 3D is very important and useful. If your primary goal is to perform clash detection between, say, your structure and your mechanical systems, or if you want to ensure that your stair tower fits into the overall architectural design, then 3D can certainly be very handy for that. If you want to do visualization or high quality rendering, then 3D is going to be pretty important. However, when talking about BIM, 3D is only part of the equation. Let's remember that it is BIM. And I think that the I in BIM is sometimes even more compelling than the M. Consider a cost estimation task or specification writing or calculating energy loads or doing heating and cooling analysis, managing a program of area requirements. All of these things require data, and data is what we mean by the I in BIM. BIM puts the data and the graphics on equal footing, and more importantly, keeps them both in the same place. Your model is both a graphical or 3D model and a data model. Instead of manually and externally computing all of the various things that we need to do to achieve a proper design, why not let the computer do what it does best? Compute stuff. That is what the I in BIM is all about. Still not convinced? Well, let's consider one more powerful benefit offered by Revit. It does 2D just as well as it does 3D. That is to say that the physical building model and sheet-based documentation remain fully coordinated and always in sync. No updates, no refreshing required to output a set of sheets or PDFs. The documentation is driven by the data within the model. Each view in a Revit project is specifically designed and intended for a certain task or purpose, be it 3D modeling, design coordination, or the output of a 2D permit set. It all comes from the same BIM. Therefore, as we begin to learn Revit, we will not focus just on modeling, as compelling as modeling is, but we will also think about the information, the I in BIM, and the documentation tasks. Having all of these things together in a fully coordinated package is why Revit gives us a fully implemented BIM solution. All elements in the Revit software fit into a predefined and structured hierarchy. At the top of that hierarchy, we have categories. Categories are broken down into families. Families can have one or more types. And then finally, at the bottom of the hierarchy, we have instances. So let's start with categories. Categories are built into the software and not editable by end users. Now, there are categories for all sorts of elements. The most common would be model elements that represent real things. Examples would include walls, floors, or doors. But there are several other kinds of categories as well. We have items for annotation, such as text and dimensions. We have detail items like lines and filled regions. We have view elements like floor plans, elevations, and sections. And we have datum elements like grids and levels. Now, at the moment, it's not really important to know every single category and go looking for some comprehensive list. What is important to understand is that categories are built into the software, and as users, we can't add, delete, or rename the categories. Now, this at first might seem like a limitation, but actually this makes categories very powerful as well. And the reason for that is that elements automatically inherit the properties of the category. So for example, elements will automatically use the correct category and can't ever be on the wrong category. It's simply not possible in the software. Categories also import many important special behaviors on their elements. For example, if you consider walls, walls will have many expected wall-like behaviors. They'll have length and height. They'll enclose space. They can host doors and windows. Now, conversely, doors and windows, therefore, must be placed on a wall host. They will cut a hole in that host and will automatically stay connected to that host wall if it moves or changes. Now, the next level of the hierarchy is the family. Now, family at first seems like a strange choice of name if you're new to the software, but simply think of it in terms of a collection of elements that share common characteristics, behaviors, and settings. So they're all related in some way, like a family. Now, every category contains at least one family, but in many cases, there can be several. Now, where categories are very general in scope, the family gets much more specific. For example, let's consider the doors category. Doors come in all sorts of shapes, sizes, and configurations. It's a very broad concept that includes anything that cuts a hole in a wall and has some sort of barrier to entry. But we can have single doors, we can have double doors, we can have revolving doors, overhead coiling doors, and each of these would be much more specific and would be examples of what a family is. So when you want to get to that very specific kind of door, as opposed to just saying it's a door, that's when we're talking about the family. But even those distinctions are still pretty broad. In other words, even though we might say that we have a single swinging door with a vision panel in it, there might be several variations possible within that door itself. So those variations can be saved and named as something called a type. So a type is quite simply a saved and named variation of a family. And a very common variation might include the size of the door. So maybe we have a standard size, maybe we have a wide one, maybe we have a tall one. Now, we could even have ones that have the actual numerical descriptions in the name. So the overall configuration in all these cases would remain the same and be constant and driven by the family, but those specific widths and heights would vary with the type. Now, finally, you can select individual elements on screen in the software. And when you do, this is thought of as an instance. So the instance will have its own properties as well. So in some cases, you can select individual elements and modify just that object. So an example might be with our doors again, thinking of the swing angle or how far inset from the face of the wall it is. Those would be instance level characteristics and not driven by the type, family, or category. Now, when you think about this Revit hierarchy, you can really think about it two ways. You can start at the instance and say that the instance belongs to a type. The type is part of a broader family, and the family is part of the overall category. or you could start at the category and work your way back down again, as we indicated. So think of the category as being the most general and the instance as being the most specific. And so modifications that you make at each level will have either a very broad effect or a very isolated effect, depending on what you have selected and what specific modification you're making in the software. So as you begin to get comfortable with Revit and begin working with it, you'll see that you're never far from the Revit element hierarchy. For now, it's fine to have just a general idea of how the hierarchy works and the kinds of behaviors that each level imparts. But as you get deeper into the software, you'll see just how pervasive categories, families, types, and instances will be across all of your work. In this video, we're going to take a first-hand look at the hierarchy concepts that we discussed in the previous video, but we're going to do it hands-on directly in the software this time. So let me just remind you of how that hierarchy is organized. We start at the top with categories. These are broad groupings. Those break down into one or more families. Each family can have one or more types, and then finally types will have multiple instances throughout your model. What I want you to see in this video is that we can make modifications at each level of that hierarchy, and the impact will be sometimes very localized if it's an instance property versus very global as you move up the hierarchy to things like families and categories. And I'm going to start by showing you how to identify all that information in the first place. So let's get a little closer. So we're going to zoom in on this plan here. I'm going to right click anywhere and choose zoom in region. And I'm going to start right about here in the third office up and just kind of click the corner of this magnifying glass and then drag a box around the reception area and then click again, just so that we're zooming in on the middle of the plan about like so. So the first thing I want to do is show you how to identify what the category, family, and type is of any element on screen. Now, to start off with, don't click anything. I just want you to move your mouse nearby one of the objects. So we're going to move nearby this wall, and notice the tooltip that appears on screen. Now, after a moment, it will disappear, but it still persists down in the lower left-hand corner of the screen on the status bar. So in either location, the message is telling us three important bits of information. The first part of the message says walls. That's our category. Then there's a separator of a colon, and then it says basic wall. That's our family. And then there's another colon, and it says interior partition 2 hour. That's the type. Now, you'll see that information on any element you hover over. So if I change my mouse's position and move over here to this door, now the category is doors, the family is door passage single vision light, and the type is standard. What about this piece of furniture? The category is furniture, the family is chair courbouh, and the type is chair. Now, this doesn't apply to just model elements. You're going to see the same information if you hover over one of these tags. So room tags is the category, room tag is the family, and then room tag again is the type. And likewise with this dimension, and likewise with this door tag. Now, some objects like this room element here will say the category of rooms. It'll say room for the family, but then it'll say corridor 103. And then if we compare that to this room, it says reception 101. And we'll see the same thing with this dashed line here. That's going to say grid B. This one over here is going to say grid 3. Well, grids is still the category. Grid is the family, but now it's telling us the name of that element instead of the type. So in the case of named elements like grids and rooms, it's going to tell you the name instead of the type on the tooltip. But in all cases, we can also see that information by first selecting the object. So I'm going to come back to the original wall, click on screen to select it. And so we can then see that same information over here on this properties palette, and it's just organized a little differently. So we've got the category here, and then above that, we're going to see a drop down that says basic wall, interior partition 2 hour, basic wall's the family, and interior partition 2 hour is the type. Now, regardless of what you select in this case, you're going to see that information. So notice if I select a grid this time, grids is the category, grid is the family, and this time instead of telling me that's grid 3, it says that it's medium bubble. And likewise with the room. If I select the room, it's going to simply say the rooms category there. Actually, rooms are an exception. So they won't tell us family and type information, but it will tell us the rooms category. Okay, so now you know how to identify the category, family, and type of elements on the model, either by hovering over them or looking on the properties palette. So now let's look at some ways that we can change the elements at each of those levels. And I'm going to start with a simple room tag example. So I want you to come over here and select the tag for corridor 103. Now, this is the actual corridor here. We want to select the tag element, so the label that says the text information. Over here on the properties palette, it'll say it's a room tag, and it'll say room tag again here. This is actually a drop-down menu. So you can open that up and change the instance properties of this tag to a different type. So I'm going to change that to room tag with area. Now notice that the area now appears beneath that tag, but it does not appear anywhere else in the floor plan. So every other tag on this floor plan is not showing the area, only the one in the corridor is. So that's an example of an instance level modification. I've decided that this tag should show the area. Okay? Now you could do that for other tags as well, but you would have to select the ones you wanted to change to make that change. So let's move up one step on the hierarchy now and make a type level modification. I'm going to switch tags for that. So I'm going to move over here into Office 112 and select this tag. Now, to make a type level modification, you use the Edit Type button here on Properties. So I'll do that. That displays this window. And let's do something really simple like turn off Show Room Number and click OK. Now notice the impact of that change. Every tag except Corridor 103 has now hidden its room number. And that's because I've made that change at the type level. So a type level modification is more global, and you can see that you don't even have to have the elements selected in order to make that change. So naturally, you want to do that cautiously, but assuming that you didn't want to see room numbers for any of your room labels, that could be an effective way to do it. Let's move up one more step on the hierarchy. Now, to get to the family level, which is the next step up, we need to actually edit the family in an environment called the Family Editor. So I'm going to keep that tag selected and click this Edit Family button right here. That's going to bring me into the family symbol, and I can actually now make changes to it. Let's select the room label. Let's edit its type. And I'm going to do two things. I'm going to change to a different font. It doesn't matter which one you choose. Just choose any font that will be noticeably different. And it doesn't matter what color you choose. Just choose any other color of your liking. I'm just going to simply pick red here. So my text got compressed. It turned red. I should be able to see that difference pretty easily. I'm going to use this button here on the ribbon to load these changes back into the project. When I do, it will say that it already exists and ask if it's okay to overwrite the existing one. So I'm going to choose this option here to overwrite the existing version. And now notice what's happening. It's pretty interesting, right? This time, it didn't affect just these tags, the ones without the room numbers. It also affected this one. That's an example of a family level modification. When you edit at the family level, it will impact all instances of that family, not just the ones of a particular type and not just the ones that are selected. So each time we're moving up the hierarchy, you can see that it's having more and more impact globally across the model. Now, that brings us to category, our final highest step on the hierarchy. And to show you a category level modification, I'm going to switch categories now. So instead of the room tags, I'm going to switch over here to these furniture items. And I'm going to use furniture because it's pretty easy to tell them apart. This is furniture, it's a chair. This is furniture, it's a table. This is also furniture, that's a custom reception desk. This is another kind of chair. So naturally, we have a wide variety of furniture elements available to us. And what separates each one from one another is that they are all different families. Well, if I want to do something to all the furniture, regardless of instance, regardless of type, regardless of family,
then I need to work at the category level. So I'm going to select any furniture element, it doesn't matter which one, go to this paintbrush, override by category, and what I'm going to do here is apply a solid fill pattern in some color. So you can choose whatever color you like. I'm going to choose this purple color here and click OK. And now notice the effect of that change. Every piece of furniture, regardless of family, regardless of type, is now shaded in this purple color. That's the most global and the highest level on the hierarchy. So hopefully this exercise is giving you some sense of how that hierarchy works and how important it is. As we move through the course, we're going to see plenty more examples of working at each of these levels of the hierarchy. And the more that you practice it, the more you work with it, the more it will become internalized. But it's really a core concept in Revit that you really want to make sure that you're comfortable with, because it's really one of the most powerful features of the software and certainly something that you want to be comfortable with. In this video, I want to give you a quick overview of the sample model that's included with the Revit software. Now, there's actually several. I'm in the architectural model here in this video, but there is one for structure, for electrical, for plumbing, for mechanical, and then there's even a site model and an existing conditions model that you can open and access. Now, they're all linked together, and we'll be talking more about links in a future video, so don't worry if you don't understand what I mean by that just yet. But all of these disciplines come together into a complete building project that I encourage you to spend some time exploring, because it's a really good way for you to get a sense of what's possible in a Revit project, particularly if you're a new user. So I'm going to start here on this cover sheet for the architectural model. And let me just show you how I got to this file. It might be accessible directly from your home screen. And we're going to talk about the home screen very shortly in a future video. But even if you don't see it on your home screen, you can still get to it from the file menu. So I'm going to go to the file menu here, hover over the open command, and then down toward the bottom of the open menu here, you should see sample files. If you click that and scroll down, you will see each of the sample models listed here. Now, the name of the project is Snowden Towers, so that's going to come first. And then here's the architectural, the electrical, the facades, which is the existing conditions that I mentioned, HVAC, plumbing, and here's the site model I mentioned, and structural. So you could open up any one of those to explore, but I'm going to stick with the architectural model for this video here. Now, I'm on the cover sheet, as I mentioned, and I'm just going to roll my wheel here to zoom in a little bit on this rendering that you see here in the middle of the screen. And you can see on the right-hand side of the rendering, there are these brick facades. Those are the existing conditions. So what's unique about this project is there's actually a real site where this project is located. It's in a town called Brownsville, Pennsylvania. And those existing facades were actually present on the site until very recently. Now, what has happened in this project is it's been reimagined as if those facades were still standing, and they've been incorporated into this new facility. So that new facility incorporates not only these existing facades here, but also the structure to the left. Now, to the left, you've got down at ground level a cafe, and then above that is office space behind these sloping facades here, and those are solar panels on the sloping facades. And then the existing conditions over on the right that I pointed out, those brick historic facades, there is retail spaces on the ground level, and then residential spaces on the floors up above. So it's a mixed use facility where you can really get a sense of some of these different functions put to use in a Revit project. Now, if I hold the wheel in and I drag, you can see that there's a note beneath that rendering which explains to you how to use this project. So it's telling you about each of those models that I've already pointed out to you. And then there is some information over here about how to access and link those together. And then right here is a note that says that you can open up a sheet called G001 if you want to learn more about the project. Now, the way you get to the sheets is to scroll all the way down here on this palette here called the project browser. There's a sheets branch here. And if I continue to scroll down, you're going to locate that G001 sheet. You just double click it to open it up, and it will display this view where you can see this multi-page description of the project and some of the important features. And I encourage you to read through all of that. Now, next to that, you're going to see this how do I schedule here. And you can almost think of this like a checklist. In fact, if you double click this, it will open that up as a separate view in your interface. And you'll notice that there's these little check boxes over here that you can actually click. And what that means is you can kind of go through each of these topics. And then after you've read and understood those topics, you can kind of check them off the list. Now, what those refer to, if I go back to the cover sheet, is these little pillbox symbols here that you'll see peppered throughout the project. And whenever you encounter one of those, you can select it. And then over here on the properties palette, you will see that it gives you a summary right here. In this case, it's saying place raster images. And then beneath that will be a URL, which takes you to the help file for Revit and explains more information about using that feature. So many of these features we will be talking about throughout this course, but some of them we won't. And even the ones that we do, you'll have these direct links to the help system where you can learn more. And so I really encourage you to do that, especially if you are a new user to the software. Now I'm going to open up just one or two more of these sheets here just to give you a little bit of a flavor of this project. Let's start with A101 first floor plan. And this is a sheet that has the first floor plan of the building and this little planting schedule here. Now, let me just kind of put my mouse right about here in this white space and kind of roll in a little so that we can see a little bit of the view itself and then the schedule down here. So this little park out in front of the building, this planting schedule is referring to those, right? So that you can see there's different trees here and park benches and so on. If we then kind of look around in here, you'll see this floor plan has dimensions and it's got wall tags and window tags and so forth. So it's a very complete sort of construction documents level floor plan. And obviously you can see that there's many learning links throughout this view. If you scroll through the list of sheets, there's several other sheets available. We've got elevation sheets and sections and schedules. I'm going to open up one of the elevation sheets here. And I like this one. This is A202 because it shows this really nice view of the historic facade right here. So this is kind of a close-up view of that main facade. And again, it's got some learning links, but you can kind of see the details of that historic structure. So take some time to go through this model, familiarize yourself with it. You'll be learning about Revit along the way, and you'll be seeing a really good example of the kinds of things that we're able to do in Revit, many of which we'll be covering throughout the videos that follow throughout the course.